So this evening we recited the fire sermon in English, and it's one of the what they call cardinal discourses. One of the early, very important discourses of the Buddha, and it's of course it's very short. It's very stark, and had quite a powerful effect. 1,000 they were wanderers of other sects, fire worshippers, and the Buddha used the image of fire, and they were all awakened. And one can either sort of disbelieve it well, it's a bit much, or think, well, can't be that difficult. Just disenchantment. Disenchantment with the eye, disenchantment with all the sense bases and the objects of senses and the experience of the senses. But it, of course, it's I think one is probably a very appropriate record. Something happened early on in the time of the Buddha, and it was recorded and passed down. And they had been practicing for quite a long time and had been seekers. But to me, what it highlights is something, say, like Ajahn Chah. One of his ways of speaking, and I remember one time he was asked, why? I think it was actually by Jack Kornfield. Why was it that he seemed to thrive in the teachings and experience the fruits of the teachings and fruits of the training. Why was that? Because it's not that ordinary or common. And Ajahn Chah was, he said, well, I dared to practice. I dared to take the Buddha's teachings seriously. I felt that it was true, and I dared to actually do it, which I think is a really important aspect, because we've all got excuses to not quite put them into practice, not quite sort of fulfill them. Cut corners here, cut corners there, and it's really ordinary, or it's just the power of habit and conditioning is is so strong that one ends up, being pulling away from Dhamma, or veering off Dhamma. But so this sense of daring to practice, kind of challenging oneself to not always take the easy way, or take the way that one's either the external society or the internal preferences and biases go, to be willing to challenge oneself a bit and realize that the stakes are actually high. We can have this opportunity to experience a real awakening and freedom of heart, freedom from greed, hatred, delusion, freedom from the limitations of conditioned existence. Or we can keep plodding along, following that kind of that trail. But just the reality that and of course saying that is it's really important to recognize that yes, there is this sort of kind of noble path, noble way of practice, but we also have to. You can't just sort of try to make yourself conform, or so you keep pushing yourself to go against the grain with everything. One really needs to. When the Buddha talks of this middle way, this is a very balanced and even path of attunement to not just external truth, but the internal truth of what we're experiencing, how we experience it, how we adjust and adapt to it, and how we adjust and adapt to truth and to kind of the real nature of our existence. So it's a there's a real refinement that's required, it's needed. And so their sense to dare to practice requires a turning inwards and tuning in. And one of the things that's really important is like really learning how to ask the right questions of oneself, of one's experience. Really, because so often we ask the wrong questions, or we pose the wrong assumptions, and that really questioning ourselves of what are we, how are we going about this, and are we learning? Are we growing? Are we maturing? Are we establishing ourselves in what is truly peaceful? What is truly aligned with what is the Buddha's awakening. So it's being willing to question ourselves in that way and reflecting. That investigation is really important, which is not just a kind of a clever intellectual exercise. It's a real tuning in. and paying attention, because that's that sense of what really leads to increase in well-being, increase in clarity, and an increase in real kind of skill, wisdom. So so we have to pay attention to so like our emotions and mental states are, we have to. It's like again something that an idiom that Ajahn used to use. He said, you really have to read your own heart, and so you have to. Said in the same way that he said, you read books and you learn from books. We said you really have to read your own heart and learn from your own heart, because there's we experience different emotions and mental states, and there's kind of desire or fear, or acceptance, aversion. So these are we experience them, but are they all good? Are they all bad? You have to really investigate and see, because sometimes there's always say the positive and negative aspects or consequences to our different mental states, so we have to be able to discern quite clearly. It's like with desire. It's just in the Buddhist teaching, the Buddha points to desire as the cause of suffering, which is it's very straightforward. But there's different kinds of desire, and that's expressed pretty clearly in the in the Pali language, but not so much in English. So that recognizing that there's, desire that leads to suffering, or consistently leads to suffering, is what the Buddha called tanha, and that's desire that's tainted by greed, hatred, delusion, clinging, attachment. But there's desire that is desire to come to puja, desire to come to the meditation, to listen to Dhamma, desire to practice. Those are very wholesome desires that need to be nurtured. You can't just sort of, if I cut off all desire, somehow I'm going to be enlightened. We have to figure out how to encourage ourselves, how to motivate ourselves, and that takes an application, a skillful application of desire. Fear, one of the, certainly fear can be a negative state and dogs us into anxiety and worry, and that it clouds the mind. But then experiencing a shrinking back. It's like hiri and ottappa. One of the translations is it's a fear of wrongdoing, but it comes from a wholesome place, because one is recognizing the untoward consequences both to oneself and to others, and so it's motivated out of respect for oneself and respect for others, and so so this sense of on paper it looks like there's fear and should be, but it's a really wholesome kind of fear, or say like acceptance. It's like it's important to be accepting and kind and not contentious. But should we be just kind of blindly accepting everything? There's lots of dumb things in the world, and lots of dumb things even in Buddhism that you want to be cautious of. You want to be wending your way through. That discernment and asking the right questions. How's this working? What's the result of this? What's the experience? What's the feeling? Same. And so that goes with the whole range of human emotion. Because that's emotion, mental states. They set in motion our feelings, our reactions, our actions and speech. So we have to really be willing to attend closely and, as I said, ask the right questions. Well, how to use this? How to use this skillfully? How to turn this into something that's actually really beneficial? And it's just like that going against the grain. In that way, is not just a blind pushing, but it's learning how to turn these internal and external circumstances to one's benefit, and taking an interest in how to do that. And that and to a certain degree, it's really like taking delight in doing what is in accordance with truth, what is lifting one out of what is unskillful or unbeneficial, unwise. Like there's a sutta I particularly like where the Buddha talking about the 4 astounding and amazing things that manifest when a Tathagata comes into the world. So the Buddha references himself as the Tathagata. So when the Buddha comes into the world, there's 4 astounding and amazing things happening, and people delight in attachment, and the word for attachment in that is alaya. And it's more like attachment, desire, entanglement. It's another word for that vortex of desire and attachment. people delight in attachment. But when, say, a Buddha comes into the world and teaches for non-attachment, and pointing to the benefits of non-attachment, to non-clinging, to non-entanglement, to freedom from desire, people actually listen. They listen. They lend an ear. They set their minds on understanding that. And, this is an amazing, an astounding thing. And the second one is people delight in conceit. But when the Tathagata, the Buddha, teaches for the relinquishment of conceit, or the letting go of conceit, then people they cease to rejoice in it and delight in it and want to listen. They lend an ear. They want to set their minds to understanding it. Well, that sense of conceit is important to understand from a Buddhist perspective. Again, it's helpful to know some of the ways that the Buddha used language, because in the English language, when you say the word conceit, that usually means somebody is kind of lords himself over others, or feels themselves superior to others. But the Buddha's use of the word conceit is when it's any form of self-position in comparison to others. In that sense of, so that identification, identifying with that I, me, mine, I'm superior, I'm inferior, I'm equal, I've got to find a place to stand amongst it, rather than sort of realizing that what we call our identification, what we call a sense of I and me and mine, it's a moving target. It's not really, there is no solidity or substantiality there. And of course, you pay attention to the mood or the mental state, but to create a sense of identity around that is it's a good way to suffer, but it's not a good way to live peacefully. So that's the second thing that the Buddha says is astounding and amazing. And the third one is people delight in excitement. But when they take delight in it, they rejoice in it. But when a Tathagata teaches for and the word that the Buddha uses in that case for excitement is a negative sense, anupasama, and upasama is peace. So that's delighting in non-peace. So when the Buddha teaches a doctrine for the realizing of peace, he says it's astounding and amazing because people actually listen. They lend an ear. They want to. They turn their attention to understanding it, and that goes against the grain. It goes against the habits which like going against the grain, going against the habits, in that way of say, against attachment, against conceit, against that inclination to stimulation, excitement, and stirring the mind up, and inclining to peace. It's astounding and amazing. It's not common. The last one is, people delight in ignorance, and that and there's it's just like an egg enveloped, and sort of like one shuts oneself off in a little cocoon of not knowing clearly, of avijja, lack of true knowledge. And you think, 2,500 years ago that was the case. These days is the case. Now so much of the world, especially with the kind of the proliferation of media, that really does seal you off in your own little cocoon of your own little echo chamber that suits your delusions and confusions and proliferations, and you can prop that up quite comfortably. How the Buddha expressed that is kind of prescient of the very modern way that we go about in gaining knowledge of the world around us these days. So it's but when the Buddha teaches for the ending of ignorance, for the breaking of that egg of that one is enveloped in, of that shell that one encases oneself in of delusion. And people take an interest in it, and this is astounding and amazing, because the Buddha's teachings give the opportunity to really break free of the limitations of our greed, hatred, delusion, the limitations of our biases that we have in so many different biases, preferences that we have in so many ways, and open up a path for clear seeing. So and we can look on that teaching in a way that is a kind of astounding and amazing, and it's supportive of our kind of faith and devotion, which is a good thing. And it is, I think it is helpful that to be reflecting on how different the Buddha's teaching, the capacity of the Buddha's teaching to really transform your ordinary run-of-the-mill human being into somebody who is actually peaceful and has the capacity for liberation. And it's worthy of devotion. It is astounding and amazing. But also to be really turning it inwards, paying attention to the questions we ask ourselves, challenging ourselves to, and not in a kind of relentless way, but in a really kind and wise way, that we have the capacity to free our hearts from attachment, free our hearts from conceit, free our hearts from agitation and from ignorance. We have this capacity, and to be willing to put forth the attention and effort and energy and commitment to do that. So that sense of, again, thinking back to Ajahn Chah when he's asked, how was it that he was able to be really experience the fruits of the practice, and he's daring to practice, daring to do it, daring to take a chance on these teachings and the training. And it has that capacity to give astounding and amazing results. So I'll offer that for reflection this evening. Reflection this evening. Reflection this evening. Reflection this evening.